Hello, my name is Dr. Stanley Lang and welcome to this video. This is the first video in a series of 3 main teaching videos that are going to show you a lot about what art can do for your children and for yourself in terms of growing in self-esteem, in visualization, in goal setting, and actually becoming a creative person in whatever part of life that you're in, whether you're working at some particular job or you want to be an artist. Now, a little bit about myself. I've been a family practice doctor for more than 30 years. I'm not an artist, but I love art. And I've always been fascinated with art since my years in college. And I've had a wonderful experience watching my children grow in becoming artists. And so it is through this process that I decided to join with others to create a program that would allow people of all ages, children all the way up to older adults, to become artists if they wanted to do that. Now, one of the reasons I decided to do this is because, as you know, school districts have been cutting back dramatically on their resources being given to the art departments and art programs. And so more and more children are not getting the art instruction that they need. Now, while there are thousands and thousands of free videos on YouTube and other places that can teach people various aspects of art, we felt that there was a need for a program that was systematic and taught somebody exactly what they needed to do from point A to point B to point C to really become a good artist. And so that's what we set out to create and have created that with the Art Talkin' program. Now, the Art Talkin' program is more than just a systematic approach to filling this need of teaching the basics of art. It really teaches people a lot of other really neat things about art that I'll detail in our 4th video. But my purpose at this point is primarily to introduce you to the person that I'm interviewing right after this section of the video. So I had the privilege of interviewing a good friend who is a retired art teacher, and she spent her whole career teaching art. She's got wonderful insights on how art can help you and your children grow in self-esteem. And it is that ability to grow in self-esteem that really took me by surprise when I interviewed Gail, because I wasn't expecting her to go there. I was expecting her to go to places of creativity and all the other neat things that we know about art, but she went straight to the idea of self-esteem. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she had hit the nail on the head, and that that is one of the crucial things that's needed nowadays, and it's also something that art provides. So without further ado, I introduce you to Gail Borden, who is going to provide an interview with me as we talk about art and its potential benefit for both children and adults in a lot of different areas. But please pay attention to what she says about the role of growing in self-esteem. So enjoy this interview. It's a fantastic interview, and it's just a small glimpse into all of the stuff that Gail knows about art, but I'm so happy she focused on self-esteem in this video. So I wish you well, and I'll touch base with you in the next video. God bless. Hello, my name is Dr. Stanley Lang, and welcome to this video. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Gail Borden, who is a retired school teacher who specialized in teaching art. And Gail has agreed to share some of her thoughts regarding art instruction for children and the value of art for children. So thank you, Gail, for the time, and we look forward to your thoughts on the value of art for children. So if you could tell me, first of all, what was your experience as a teacher? Do you teach young children or older children, or what?
Actually, I taught all levels of children, but later, that was my early years. But then later, I specialized, if you want to call it that, in the high school, 9 through 12. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to which level I wanted to teach. Mm-hmm. And so the first 3 years, it was really wonderful that I had the experience of teaching all the levels, because then I found out it wasn't where I thought I wanted to be. I thought I would love the little children, which I love them, but a classroom full of 30, that's a whole different story. So they're little cherubs, but for
little cherubs separately. But.
Oh, gosh, yes. So I found that the high school was actually where I could communicate better. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. It was great.
So what was the thing you enjoyed most about teaching art? If you had to pick one thing that comes to mind, what would that thing be?
Well, the thing I enjoyed the most is what I consider the very most important thing any teacher can give to children, regardless of their age. and that is help them increase their self-esteem. I saw that happen time and time again with adults also, because I had adult edit for a few years too.
I see.
And it doesn't matter the age of the person. I think that is the very most important thing that can happen, and it happens, in my opinion, easily and readily in art. In fact, that's one of the things that, if you want to say a byproduct, that really happens through art.
And that's to grow in self-esteem.
Yes.
And so I'm a little surprised about the story that you actually were teaching adults also. So did you see the same self-esteem changes happen in adults?
I did, which brings me to think there's not enough self-esteem going around for everybody, or probably hardly anybody.
Right.
You know, they can also increase, anybody regardless, their self-esteem, because that's their self-image, and they carry that with them everywhere they go. I mean, whether when they graduate, if I'm doing, you know, the high school kids, they will take that into relationships, into team, at workplaces, whatever their work is, they carry themselves. And if you can help them increase their self-esteem, it's so much different. They have such a better life.
Now, why do you think that doing artwork and learning to do artwork makes one grow in self-esteem, or helps one's self-esteem? You must have thought about this over the years. What do you think was the magic thing that happened there?
Well, I guess what I really noticed, because some of the students come in and they have terrible self-esteem. And so if they can create something that others think that it's good, and I always tried to emphasize that. You know, I would go around and say, wow, you know, you really did well with this, even if something needs changed, because that's all part of learning. And that helps them to learn from mistakes or to critique, and they carry these qualities or these things with them, because I mean, we all make mistakes forever. And so if they can find out it's okay to make mistakes, because sometimes you can really, you know, correct it or rearrange it, regardless if it's just on paper, paint, or if it's in what we would call real life situations. So one of the things I'm hearing you say is that learning how to do art teaches you to be tolerant of your own imperfection, because you can see that it's not perfect yet, but at the same time gives you a way of improving and enjoying the process of improving that skill. Right, definitely, because they're kind of all in this together, even the ones who are really talented. I mean, they might be able to think of more ways to solve the problem or the assignment than some of the ones with, say, lower self-esteem or even lower talent. But when we put the work all up, let's say, to have our critiques and to evaluate them, there are positive things about every one of those, and there are usually areas that we would possibly change a little bit, you know, some more than others. But when we're all in that together and we emphasize the positive and not just cut it apart, so to speak.
Not the art critic.
Right, right. So when we would do our critiques, or I preferred to call them evaluations, they would all learn from each other, because they maybe didn't have the same problem the one before them did, but they might the next time. So it was, I think it's very positive.
Now, if you were going to sort of speculate, you know, some of what you're describing now is sort of group dynamic things. What happens with just if you were one-on-one with a student? Have you been in those sort of teaching experiences?
I really have not, and that brings up a good thought-provoking question. I would try to still do the same thing. I would hope that I could find different works of art, at least say 2 or 3 to go along with theirs for the evaluation or the critique, because it's a visual experience, even though it goes into other areas. But if they can actually see what others have done and what they have done, I think it's much easier to learn, at least for me. Visual things and most artists, it's a lot easier to learn some of the other things that kind of trail along, say, that aren't visual.
So instead of pretending that I'm already at Michelangelo's level, I actually compare myself to Michelangelo and see that I've got a little bit of room to grow here, and
Right.
and that recognition is actually good for self-image.
It really is. And another area that sort of fits in there, even if they're really good, how many different ways could they have solved that problem? So it still stretches and helps them learn and stretch and reach out into themselves even.
So what would you say is the youngest age group that this process actually happens? Is there sort of a lowest age that you saw, whatever you're describing, this self-image growing process? I mean, I can imagine even a 2-year-old scribbling,
Right.
getting something out of it.
Oh, they do. They're little self-images. I think the self-image can be absolutely even 1.5, because it totally depends on the feedback they get.
So you would be encouraging parents to be encouraging their children to be doing as much artistic expression as early as possible.
Right.
Would that be accurate?
Oh, gosh, yes. For many reasons. Now, self-esteem was the biggest one that I saw that really helped the person. But, I mean, there's so many other things. My gosh, fun. You know, everybody needs joy and fun in their life. And to do the creative scribbling or Michelangelo's works, it just brings forth creativity. And I believe, I guess, every soul on earth has some of that. Because I saw that in adult ed. It's locked up more, say, what I call the child, the creative child, is covered up more because of society and so on. But it's there. They just have to let it out. And they're so excited when they get a chance to let it out. So I think everybody benefits from that.
So part of the benefit of an adult taking the time to learn to do art is that they discover this inner creativity that's kind of been stifled for a long time.
Yes.
And in a sense, I'm not going to say their inner child, but some of the stuff that was fun,
Yes.
One of the things I notice as a doctor is that as people get older, they have a hard time genuinely having fun.
Yes.
They don't know how to have fun.
They don't. And unfortunately, they're often stuck in the idea that it has to be right, as compared to little children. They just enjoy doing it. Anything. Doesn't matter what is right to them. But as you get older, they get various concepts in their mind of what they want it to look like. And unfortunately, too often, it's more like photographic realism. And so that's kind of hard to help them realize that that's only one way to do something. And there are other ways that are also right. So...
Well, we talked about little children and even at age 1.5 being able to benefit from this process of self-esteem already growing by the art that they're doing. When do you think, what age do you think is a predictable age where a parent can sort of hand off that process to a teaching setting of some sort, whether it's one-on-one or in a class? When can they profitably, I guess, without wasting the kids' time or making them frustrated, but it's it's a good experience for the child. What age do you think that generally starts to happen?
I think it could definitely happen like kindergarten age. Even, it's hard to say, maybe nursery school, what is that, 3? I probably need help with some of this. But it would depend on how the adult would handle that. Or whatever. They have to handle it on a positive way, on a fun way. But they can interject different things to help, the child become more creative.
But I guess a different way I'm asking the question, at what point do you think that the child starts to understand some of the actual concepts that would be part of an art course where you're trying to teach different ideas that are part of art? Is there an age group?
I think you could do that to kindergarten. I mean, you would have to do it in their language.
Okay.
But you could start teaching them little concepts. I don't think they're too young if you do it on their level.
Would you say that there's an advantage to starting sooner than waiting till later?
I would. Absolutely. It's just so much fun, and it's so much fun to see them grasp it and all the joy they get. And they are learning some of these concepts. I don't think they're too young to learn. I used to tell my students, and I realized they were high school students, to train your eye to become the eye of an artist. And that means to learn to observe more. I can give you one example of that. When I was in college, one of the professors had us, as we all sat down, he said, "What kind of a doorknob is on the front door where you come in to this building?" And I mean, I didn't know. Nobody said a word. They didn't know. So in other words, he was helping us learn to be more observant. And that's what artists do. They observe, I feel, a lot more than just the average person. Like what are the designs on some of the manhole covers? They're not all the same. Things like that.
And also maybe they observe below the surface.
Yes.
They think, maybe it causes people to think below the surface. So I'm interested in what your speculation would be on the effect of art in being a good student in other disciplines and other areas. I'm assuming that you think there's some value in that, but if
could you rephrase that for me?
Okay, so let's say that I'm a student that's aiming towards biology, or I'm aiming towards math, and so I might not be inclined to do art. I may not even cross my mind as an interest. Do you think that somebody that has that kind of a focused interest already, that they benefit in those studies by also doing art?
Oh, I think they do. Because obviously there's the self-esteem thing again. That's always there.
Right, okay.
And there is the observation situation. They can learn to really see, regardless of what area they're going into, it would help them because they will be able to observe perhaps more than they otherwise would. And there's just, they can learn to, let's say if they make mistakes, to kind of what different ways could they handle that or redo it, refix it. And they learn to focus and persevere. You know, you just keep marching on. If your project doesn't work out, how can you change it so it will, or do you have to start all over? Those are all things that regardless of what area people are in, those qualities they will take with them.
And would you say that just the activity of being creative, that makes you better at anything that you're involved in? If you're turning on the creative side of your brain?
Oh, I mean, that goes without saying.
That was a slightly leading question. I guess the deeper question is, why do you think that is? How does that happen? What does creativity have to do with biology?
Well, it would bring joy to their soul. What can I say?
Well, I guess as a physician, and having gone through years and years and years of science and other related fields that don't seem to be directly related to art, when I finally took an art class at the end of my college years, it was really an eye-opening experience, and it affected everything else that I did after that.
Right. I'm glad to hear that, but that's...
It was an art history course, so I wasn't learning to do art, but I was learning to understand art and to understand a little bit of how artists were thinking when they made something.
Right.
And that became a lens through which I looked at everything else when I went through medical school, and since then it's affected all of that. And I guess I'm wondering whether other people have that experience, or is that
I would think so, because the example I said about the doorknob situation, that was not an art class. At this time, I don't remember if it was an English class or what it was, but it was a generic class. And I thought that was rather interesting that that professor would say that when we weren't art students who really learned to see more differently. So
one sort of transitioning slightly to ideas that you might have, one of the dilemmas we have nowadays is that many school districts are cutting back on resources for art. It's one of it's often considered less important by the people that are making the decisions for whatever reason. There's a lot of different reasons that might be given. What would your advice be for parents who do see a value in art for their children? How hard should they work to find an art education experience for their child?
Oh, I think they should work, because it does wonders, more than they would really realize. There are everybody is different, but bullying is a big thing right now. And so if you can increase a child's self-esteem, he's less likely to be bullied or to become a bully.
I see.
And I mean, that's just one area. And if they can get their child into art classes, the joy, and I've mentioned some of the other qualities that they will take with them. It's very important, I would say.
So making whatever effort they can is worth the effort.
It is worth the effort, and I would hope that wherever they are, that there are different artists or situations that they could get their child into.
Now, one of the things that we're attempting to do with this art talking program, of course, is to create a resource for people that don't have an art instructor with them. Clearly, that's not the same thing as having an artist, a teacher, looking over your shoulder and giving feedback and other kind of affirmation. What kind of a role can that play? How would you see that fitting in, if at all, to the solution? Part of the solution for children and or adults who are trying to get some sort of instruction, but they don't really have. They can't. There's not a class that they can go to. There's not an instructor that they could personally afford one-on-one.
Right. If the concepts are presented, I think it would work well. They could still learn to critique their own work. They would need a list of what are they looking for. Is it balanced? Does it have unity? Do the colors work together? Some of these different items that they could, if they would hear or see and make their list and then critique their own work, they could improve by doing that.
And so I'm thinking that if a parent utilized that kind of a strategy for their child, that they could play part of that role with the child as they're using some of these online resources that could help them to experience this becoming an artist experience.
Oh, I think that should work well. Really.
Well, I really appreciate all of the insights that you've shared. I'd love to hear the many stories that you could tell. But so I'm thinking, do you have one story that you'd like to tell about art?
I have one story I would like to tell. This was a down and out child, if I want to, or a teenager. They're sort of in that between thing. And he was a very quiet individual. And he sat there and he did work most of the time. And the one project, he really seemed to enjoy more, and he put forth his effort. And it was good. And so when we had to critique all the artwork up there and everybody and so on and so forth, they go down the list and talk about them and what worked and what didn't and so on. And I could see him, you know, getting more proud and more proud. And I thought, go for it, that's wonderful. And so I took his work and put it out front, in the hallway out front, on the bulletin board. And that just did wonders for him. It's amazing. I mean, it's one thing to hear verbally what I'm saying. It's a whole other story to see the difference it made in that young man. It was great. So art does wonders. It really helps people.
And it sounds like it can happen pretty quickly too.
Yes, it can. It's great.
Yeah. I heard this story of, now this isn't exactly art in the sense of the drawings and painting and stuff, but Carl Jung, who is one of the two most famous psychiatrists from in recent centuries, he actually brought in a huge sandbox to his backyard so that he could basically work in sand as a break during the day.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it's kind of like going to the beach every day and building a sandcastle.
Right.
But for him, that creative break was really crucial. If he didn't have it, I don't, let me rephrase it, he found that it helped him to be creative in terms of how he approached helping other people with their problems, because that's, you know, he's spending all day trying to help people's problems.
I think that's
it helped him to be creative.
It would, and it would also help him to relax, I would think, which is also important. And art does help people to relax.
It's, you know, it's amazed me sometimes watching people who can spend hours just on some small thing and they're just happy.
It's amazing. Obviously that was my career, and I would recommend anybody and everybody to have some kind of hobby. Whatever. So obviously some would enjoy the arts or the crafts much more than others. But I think just about anybody would enjoy relaxing and creating one way or the other.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts today, and I'm sure that anybody who has the opportunity to see this will be really blessed by your insights and experiences. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you. I have enjoyed it. Yep. I truly just have enjoyed my career. Because it helps people. That was I guess my goal, and I didn't even know it exactly until you get into it. And there it was. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Gail. You're very welcome. God bless. Bye-bye. Thank you. So I'm so happy that you had this opportunity to see this interview and listen to this interview with Gail. And I'm happy to tell you that it leads into a second interview with a school teacher who is teaching small children art, and she takes this idea of self-esteem and moves in a completely different direction about how art helps people to visualize and art helps people to set goals. So if you have children that you would love to be able to reach their full potential in terms of setting goals, visualizing, reaching their goals, and you also would like to grow in visualization and setting goals, I encourage you to watch your inbox to receive the second video, which will be coming in a couple of days, and you'll be able to understand more deeply how art can help your children and help yourself to grow in the ability to visualize, to communicate, and to reach their goals. So I wish you well. I'm so thankful that you could watch this video. God bless and have a great day.